Rain pelted the windshield like tiny bullets as Jackson Reynolds pulled his weathered pickup truck to the side of the road. The thunderstorm had come out of nowhere, turning the afternoon sky into a canvas of angry gray clouds. But that wasn't what made him stop. Through the curtain of rain, he spotted a sleek black SUV with its hazard lights blinking frantically, hood up, and a figure hunched over the engine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jackson sighed, glancing at the dashboard clock. He was already running late to pick up his daughter from after-school care, and Miss Pearson had given him that look last time, the one that silently judged single parents who couldn't manage to be on time. But something about the stranded motorist made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way they stood there, shoulders slumped in defeat, or maybe it was simply because he'd been in those shoes too many times himself. 10 minutes, he muttered, reaching for his rain jacket. That's all I can spare. The rain drenched him instantly as he jogged toward the SUV. As he approached, he realized the stranded driver was a woman. Her designer coat soaked through, her dark hair plastered against her face as she stared helplessly at the engine. Need some help? Jackson called over the downpour. The woman turned, relief washing over her face. Oh, thank goodness. It just died on me, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at here. Jackson moved closer, his practiced eye scanning. The engine. I'm Jackson. Mind if I take a look? Please, the woman said, stepping back. I'm Olivia Westbrook. Jackson leaned over the engine, his mind already cataloging possibilities. The Westbrook name tickled something in his memory, but he pushed the thought aside to focus on the task at hand. After a few minutes of examination, he spotted the issue. Your serpentine belt snapped, he explained, pointing to the frayed rubber. Without it, your alternator can't charge the battery, and your water pump stops working. Olivia's perfectly arched eyebrows furrowed. That sounds expensive. Jackson smiled despite himself. The part isn't too bad. The labor's what gets you at most garages. He checked his watch again and made a quick decision. Look, I have the tools in my truck and a spare belt that might fit. I can get you running again in 20 minutes if you'd like. Olivia's eyes widened. You'd do that? For a stranger? Jackson shrugged, already heading back to his truck. Someone did it for me once, just paying it forward. As Jackson worked, the rain gradually eased to a drizzle. He explained each step as he went, noticing how Olivia listened intently, despite the water dripping from her expensive jacket. There was something unexpected about her, a genuine curiosity beneath the polished exterior. So you're a mechanic? She asked as he tightened the new belt. Jackson wiped his hands on an old rag. By training, I work at Riverdale Manufacturing now, operating machinery. The hours are more predictable for raising a kid on my own. Understanding flickered across Olivia's face. That's admirable. And this? She gestured to his handiwork on her engine. Just a hobby now. I keep hoping to open my own restoration shop someday. The words escaped before he could stop them, a dream he rarely voiced aloud. Anyway, you should be all set. It'll get you to town, but I'd still have a professional check it out when you can. Olivia insisted on paying him, but Jackson refused, saying a simple thanks was enough. As he watched her drive away, he realized he was now very late for picking up his daughter. He rushed back into his truck, unaware that this rainy afternoon encounter would change the course of his life. Mia Reynolds was waiting at the window when Jackson finally arrived at Willow Creek Elementary's after-school program, her small face lighting up at the sight of his truck. At 8 years old, she had her mother's warm brown eyes and his stubborn chin, a combination that both delighted and terrified him. "You're late, Daddy," she announced as they walked to the truck, her tone more observational than accusatory. "I know, Pumpkin. I stopped to help someone whose car broke down in the storm. He helped her into the booster seat, making sure her seatbelt was secure. Sometimes being late is worth it if you're helping someone else. Mia considered this with the serious contemplation only children can muster. Like when I'm late for lunch because I'm helping Miss Davis clean the paintbrushes. Jackson smiled, ruffling her hair. Exactly like that. Their home was a small rental on Oak Street, a modest two-bedroom house with peeling paint and a perpetually leaky faucet that the landlord never seemed to fix. Jackson had done his best to make it warm and inviting, filling it with hand-built furniture and photographs of happier times before cancer had taken his wife 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. Behind the house stood his pride and joy, a dilapidated garage that he'd converted into a makeshift workshop. Inside, nestled between tools and spare parts, sat a 1967 Mustang in various stages of restoration, a project he'd started with Sarah before she got sick, and one he couldn't bring himself to abandon, even though time to work on it was scarce. That evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Jackson found himself in the workshop, hands moving methodically over the Mustang's engine as his mind drifted to the woman he'd helped earlier. There had been something about her, a blend of vulnerability and strength that reminded him of Sarah in those final months. Jackson shook his head, pushing the thought away. Olivia Westbrook belonged to a different world, one of luxury cars and designer clothes, not second-hand tools and late pickup notices from after-school care. Unknown to Jackson, Olivia Westbrook was thinking about him too as she sat in her father's study at the sprawling Westbrook estate on the outskirts of Riverdale. Her encounter with the mechanic-turned-factory worker had left her intrigued. His kindness had been genuine, his expertise impressive, and there had been a quiet dignity about him that she rarely encountered in her usual social circles. "There, you are?" Richard Westbrook's voice broke through her thoughts as he entered the study. "Mother said you had car trouble today." Olivia nodded, watching her father pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter. At 62, Richard Westbrook was still an imposing figure, CEO of Westbrook Industries, the largest employer in Riverdale and several neighboring towns. "Nothing serious. Someone helped me get it running again," she replied. "Good. You focused on the expansion project. The board meeting is next week, and your presentation needs to be flawless." He settled into his leather chair, eyeing her over his glasses. "This is your chance to prove yourself, Olivia. Don't waste it." Olivia fought the urge to sigh. She'd spent the past 5 years working her way up through the company, determined to earn her place rather than simply inherit it. The expansion project, which included repurposing several old industrial buildings in downtown Riverdale, was her first major initiative as development director. "The presentation is ready, Dad. I've been over the numbers a dozen times." Richard nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "And the community angle? The board won't approve unless we can show public support." This was the sticking point. Despite the promise of jobs, many locals were resistant to the changes the expansion would bring. "I'm working on it. I have meetings scheduled with several community leaders next week." After leaving her father's study, Olivia found herself driving through town, eventually passing the Riverdale manufacturing plant where Jackson had mentioned he worked. The facility was one of many owned by Westbrook Industries, though her father rarely visited the smaller operations personally. On impulse, she pulled into the parking lot. The night shift was just ending, workers streaming out to their cars, their faces etched with exhaustion after 12 hours on the assembly line. Olivia watched them, wondering if Jackson was among them or if he worked days. She wondered what he would think if he knew who she was. Not just Olivia with the broken-down SUV, but Olivia Westbrook, whose family name was on his paycheck. The next morning, Jackson arrived at work with minutes to spare. Having dropped Mia off at school, Riverdale Manufacturing produced automotive parts. The irony not lost on Jackson that he spent his days making components for cars but couldn't afford the time or resources to finish his own restoration project. Reynolds! The floor supervisor, Bill Thompson, waved him over. Got a new assignment for you today. The old Palmer building downtown. Company's sending some engineers to survey it for renovation. They need someone who knows the old machinery to help identify what's salvageable. Jackson frowned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm supposed to be on line 3 today. Thompson shrugged. Orders from above. Besides, it's a break from the usual grind, right? Just for today. Jackson couldn't argue with that. The Palmer building had once been Riverdale's premier machine shop before closing down a decade ago. He'd apprenticed there briefly as a teenager and still remembered the impressive old equipment. When he arrived downtown, a small group was already gathered outside the massive brick building. His steps faltered when he spotted a familiar figure among them. Olivia Westbrook, dressed in a tailored pantsuit, hair pulled back in a professional knot, looking nothing like the rain-soaked woman from yesterday. Before he could process this, she turned and saw him. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by what looked like genuine pleasure. Jackson! What a coincidence! She walked over, extending her hand. Thank you again for yesterday. You saved me from being stranded for hours. Jackson shook her hand, noting the surprised looks from the suits surrounding her. Just doing what anyone would do. I'm actually here on assignment. I work at Riverdale Manufacturing, and they sent me to help identify the old equipment. Something shifted in Olivia's expression. Of course, she said after a moment's hesitation. That makes perfect sense. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Olivia Westbrook, Development Director for Westbrook Industries. Jackson felt his stomach drop. Westbrook Industries, the parent company that owned Riverdale Manufacturing, along with a dozen other businesses in the county. The name had seemed familiar yesterday, but he hadn't made the connection. He was suddenly acutely aware of his worn work clothes and the grease still embedded in his fingernails, despite his best scrubbing. Nice to meet you, he managed. Again. If Olivia noticed his discomfort, she didn't show it. Instead, she turned to the group. Everyone, this is Jackson Reynolds. He'll be guiding us through the machinery today. Mr. Reynolds is something of a mechanical expert. He single-handedly fixed my car yesterday during that terrible storm. The tour of the Palmer building was surreal. Jackson found himself walking alongside Olivia through the cavernous space, pointing out vintage lathes and milling machines, explaining their functions and condition to the architects and engineers who trailed behind them taking notes. This place used to be the heart of Riverdale, Jackson said as they examined a massive metal press. My grandfather worked here for 40 years. Said you could build just about anything with the equipment in this building. Olivia studied him with genuine interest. You know a lot about these machines. I should. I learned on equipment like this. He ran his hand over a vintage metal lathe, his touch almost reverent. They don't make them like this anymore. This is craftsmanship. That's exactly why we're here, Olivia said, lowering her voice slightly. The expansion plan includes preserving the historical elements of buildings like this while repurposing them. I was thinking this could become a mixed-use space, perhaps with some sort of educational component about Riverdale's industrial heritage. Jackson looked at her with newfound respect. That's actually a great idea. Most people would just gut the place and start over. Olivia smiled, and for a moment Jackson forgot about the social chasm between them. I'm not most people. The tour concluded by mid-afternoon. As the group prepared to leave, Olivia pulled Jackson aside. I feel like I owe you a proper thank you for yesterday, she said. Would you let me buy you dinner sometime? Jackson blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. That's not necessary, Ms. Westbrook. Olivia, please. She handed him a business card, and I know it's not necessary, but I'd like to. Besides, I'd love to hear more about your restoration work. You mentioned a dream shop yesterday. Jackson hesitated, acutely aware of the difference in their worlds. He thought of Mia waiting at after-school care, of the bills piling up on his kitchen counter, of the half-finished Mustang gathering dust. I appreciate the offer, but I have a daughter to pick up after work. Single dad, remember. Olivia nodded, undeterred. Of course. Perhaps another time then. She glanced at her watch. I should join the others. Thank you for your expertise today, Jackson. It was invaluable. As Jackson watched her walk away, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross. Again, he tucked her business card into his pocket, telling himself he was just being polite. Later that week, Jackson's prediction proved true when he received a call from Bill Thompson. Reynolds, you made quite an impression on the higher-ups. Ms. Westbrook specifically requested you for a follow-up consultation at the Palmer building. They're sending some restoration specialists and she wants you there. Jackson frowned. When? Saturday morning. I know it's your day off, but they're offering double-time pay. Could be good for you, Reynolds. Getting noticed by the Westbrooks never hurt anyone's career. Jackson thought of the extra money. Mia's birthday was coming up, and she'd been dropping hints about a new bicycle. All right, I'll be there, but I'll need to bring my daughter. Whatever works, just be there at 9. Saturday morning was crisp and sunny, the kind of autumn day that hinted at winter's approach without surrendering summer's warmth entirely. Jackson helped Mia out of the truck, her backpack filled with books and snacks to keep her occupied. Is this where you work, Daddy? Mia asked, staring up at the imposing brick facade of the Palmer building. No, Pumpkin, I'm just helping out here today. He took her hand, guiding her toward the entrance. Remember what we talked about? You're going to sit quietly and read your books while I talk to some people about the machines. Mia nodded solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. And then ice cream after? Jackson laughed. Yes, then ice cream. Olivia was already inside, deep in conversation with 2 older men who Jackson guessed were the restoration specialists. She looked different today, more relaxed in dark jeans and a simple sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up as they entered, her professional smile warming into something more genuine. Jackson, thank you for coming. Her gaze dropped to Mia, who was partially hidden behind Jackson's leg. And who might this be? This is my daughter, Mia, Jackson said, gently encouraging Mia forward. Mia, this is Ms. Westbrook. She's in charge of this building. Mia stepped forward, extending her small hand with surprising formality. Pleased to meet you, Ms. Westbrook. Olivia knelt to shake Mia's hand, her expression softening. The pleasure is all mine, Mia. And please call me Olivia. She glanced up at Jackson. I hope you don't mind, but I brought something that might interest both of you. She led them to a small table set up near the back of the building where blueprints and photographs were spread out. These are the original plans for the Palmer building, along with some historical photos of the machines in operation. While Jackson and the specialists examined the blueprints, Mia became enthralled with the photographs, especially one showing a group of workers standing proudly next to a newly completed automobile. Did they make cars here, Olivia? Mia asked, her earlier shyness forgotten. Olivia shook her head, sitting beside the girl. Not exactly. They made parts for cars, special ones that couldn't be made anywhere else. Your dad knows all about that, though. Jackson looked up from the blueprints, surprised by how easily Olivia interacted with his daughter. Most executives he'd encountered barely acknowledged the existence of workers' families, let alone engaged with their children. The consultation stretched into the afternoon, with Jackson providing detailed information about each piece of machinery. The specialists were impressed. With his knowledge, often deferring to him on questions of restoration feasibility. Throughout it all, Olivia took careful notes, occasionally asking insightful questions that revealed a genuine interest in preserving the building's heritage. Mia, having exhausted her books, had taken to exploring the safer areas of the building, under Olivia's watchful eye, while Jackson worked. To his surprise, Olivia seemed completely at ease with his daughter, answering her endless questions with patience and even teaching her a simple game involving counting different types of machines. As the specialist prepared to leave, Olivia approached Jackson. "Your daughter is wonderful," she said. "Smart and curious. She asked more intelligent questions about the machinery than most adults I know." Pride swelled in Jackson's chest. "She's amazing, keeps me on my toes." "I promised her ice cream," Olivia said, a slight question in her tone. "If you don't mind, I know a great place just down the street. My treat for both of you." The offer caught Jackson off guard. Part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain the professional boundary between them, but Mia was already bouncing with excitement at the mention of ice cream, and he found himself nodding. "That would be nice, thank you." The ice cream shop was a small, family-owned place with hand-painted signs and checkerboard tiles. To Jackson's surprise, Olivia seemed perfectly at home there, greeting the elderly owner by name and asking about his grandchildren. They sat at a small table by the window, Mia happily demolishing a chocolate sundae, while Jackson and Olivia made small talk. The conversation flowed more easily than Jackson expected, touching on the history of Riverdale, their favorite classic cars, and eventually circling back to the restoration project. "I have to admit," Olivia said, "I was nervous about this project at first. My father's original plan was to tear everything out and convert the space into modern offices." Jackson raised an eyebrow. What changed his mind? Olivia hesitated, stirring her coffee. "I did, or at least I'm trying to. The board meeting is next week and I'm presenting an alternative vision, one that preserves the industrial heritage while creating something new." She met his gaze directly. "Your insights have been incredibly helpful, actually. You see value in these old machines that most people miss." Before Jackson could respond, Mia piped up, chocolate sauce smeared across her cheek. "Daddy can fix anything. He's fixing a really old car in our garage. It was Mommy's favorite." A flicker of understanding crossed Olivia's face. "Is that so? What kind of car is it, Mia?" "A Mustang," Mia said proudly, "from the olden days." Jackson smiled, wiping Mia's face with a napkin. 1967 Mustang Fastback. It was my wife's dream car. We started restoring it together, but he trailed off, not wanting to burden the conversation with grief. Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's a special project, then." "It is," Jackson agreed, "though finding time and space to work on it is challenging. My garage is barely big enough, and with my work schedule." "Have you ever thought about joining a co-op shop?" Olivia asked. "There's one on the east side of town, Riverbend Restoration. They have shared space and tools for classic car enthusiasts." Jackson shook his head. "The waiting list is 2 years long, and the membership fees are steep." He changed the subject, uncomfortable with discussing his financial limitations. "How did you get interested in historical preservation? It seems unusual for someone in corporate development." Olivia's expression softened. "My grandfather, actually. He believed that progress doesn't mean erasing the past. It means building on its foundation." She glanced around the ice cream shop. "Places like Palmer Building, like this shop, they're the heart of Riverdale. I don't want to see that lost." As they left the ice cream shop, Jackson felt strangely conflicted. Olivia Westbrook was nothing like he'd expected. Despite her wealth and position, she seemed genuinely invested in the community, respectful of its history and surprisingly down to earth. Yet she was still a Westbrook, still part of a world that was fundamentally different from his own. "Thank you for the ice cream," he said as they prepared to part ways, "and for being so kind to Mia." Olivia smiled, watching as Mia examined a storefront window display nearby. "She's a delight, Jackson. You're doing a wonderful job with her." She hesitated, then added, "I'd still like to hear more about your restoration work sometime. Your passion for it is obvious." Jackson nodded, unsure how to respond. "Maybe someday. Good luck with your board presentation." As he and Mia drove home, his daughter chatted excitedly about Olivia and the ice cream and the old machines. Jackson listened with half an ear, his mind on the woman who had unexpectedly entered their lives. There was something about Olivia Westbrook that intrigued him, a complexity beneath the polished exterior that he hadn't anticipated. What Jackson didn't know was that Olivia was equally intrigued by him. As she drove back to the Westbrook estate, she found herself thinking about his skilled hands bringing old machinery back to life, about the warmth in his eyes when he looked at his daughter, about the dream restoration shop he'd mentioned in passing. And somewhere in those thoughts, an idea began to take shape, one that would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The autumn chill had settled firmly over Riverdale by the time the board meeting arrived. Olivia stood before the 12 members of the Westbrook Industries board, her presentation materials meticulously prepared, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Her father sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral as she outlined her vision for the Palmer building. "Rather than simply converting this historic space into offices," she explained, displaying renderings on the projection screen, "I propose we create a community innovation center that honors Riverdale's industrial heritage while fostering its future." The concept she presented was ambitious. The ground floor would become a working museum of restored vintage machinery, offering educational programs for local schools. The second floor would house mixed-use workspaces for small businesses and startups focused on manufacturing innovation. The third floor would be converted into a technical training facility, partnering with the community college to provide hands-on experience with both historic and modern equipment. "The financial projections," Olivia continued, advancing to her next slide, "indicate a slightly longer timeline to profitability than the original office plan. However, the community benefits and long-term value creation far outweigh the initial investment difference." When she finished, the room fell silent. Several board members exchanged glances, and Olivia braced herself for the objections she knew would come. She didn't have to wait long. "This is all very idealistic," said Harold Winters, the longest-serving board member and her father's close friend. "But Westbrook Industries isn't a charity, Olivia. The additional costs for preservation and restoration of that antiquated machinery could be better allocated to more modern facilities." Olivia had anticipated this reaction. With respect, "Mr. Winters, preserving these machines isn't just sentiment, it's smart business. The skills required to understand and maintain this equipment are becoming rare, driving up the value of both the machinery and the expertise. Our research indicates significant interest from manufacturing educators and historians who would pay for access." Other questions followed about timeline, about community engagement, about zoning considerations. Olivia answered each one thoroughly, drawing on her conversations with Jackson and the insights he'd provided about the equipment's value and historical significance. Finally, her father spoke. "This is certainly a departure from our usual development approach," Richard Westbrook said, adjusting his glasses. "The board will need time to consider the proposal. Thank you, Olivia." She recognized the dismissal in his tone and gathered her materials, trying not to show her disappointment at the lack of immediate approval. As she left the boardroom, her father's assistant approached her. "Your father would like to see you in his office," she said quietly. Richard Westbrook was standing at the window when Olivia entered, looking out over the manicured grounds of the corporate headquarters. "That was quite a presentation," he said without turning around. Olivia set her portfolio on his desk. "I believe in this project, Dad." Clearly, he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Your passion was evident, but passion doesn't always translate to profit." "It's not just about profit," Olivia said, then caught herself. "At least, not immediate profit. This approach builds goodwill in the community, creates educational opportunities, and still provides a solid return." Over time, Richard studied her for a long moment. This sudden interest in industrial preservation. It wouldn't happen to be influenced by that factory worker you had showing you around, would it? Thompson mentioned you specifically requested him. Olivia felt a flicker of irritation. "Jackson Reynolds has extensive knowledge of the machinery we're trying to preserve. His input has been valuable from a practical standpoint." "I see." Richard circled his desk and sat down. "The board will vote next week. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare alternative proposals that address some of the concerns raised today." Olivia recognized the conversation was over. As she reached the door, her father added, "And Olivia, remember that Westbrook Industries has a reputation to maintain. Be selective about who you associate with professionally." The thinly veiled reference to Jackson made her shoulders tense, but she left without responding to it. Across town, Jackson's day was unfolding with challenges of its own. He stood in the kitchen of his small rental house, phone pressed to his ear, listening to the landlord's apologetic but firm voice. "I'm sorry, Reynolds, but the property's been sold. The new owner wants to renovate, which means all current tenants need to be out by the end of January." Jackson closed his eyes, trying to process this news. "That's barely 2 months away. Can't you talk to them about extending the timeline? At least until the school year ends?" "Wish I could help you, but my hands are tied. They paid well. Above market value, and the paperwork's already signed." After hanging up, Jackson braced his hands against the kitchen counter, mind racing. Finding affordable rentals in Riverdale was already difficult, especially ones within walking distance of Mia's school. The thought of uprooting his daughter mid-school year twisted his stomach into knots. The sound of the back door opening interrupted his thoughts. Mia burst in, cheeks flushed from playing outside. "Daddy, come quick. There's a lady in our yard, looking at your workshop." Jackson frowned, following his daughter outside. To his surprise, Olivia Westbrook stood near his garage, examining the exterior with a thoughtful expression. She wore casual clothes, jeans and a simple sweater, but somehow still managed to look out of place in his modest backyard. "Ms. Westbrook," Jackson called, confusion evident in his voice. Olivia turned, a slightly embarrassed smile crossing her face. "Jackson, I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced. And please, it's Olivia." Mia bounced on her toes beside him. "She said she wanted to see your car, Daddy." Jackson glanced between his daughter and Olivia. "Did she now?" Olivia tucked her hands into her pockets. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and remembered you mentioned your restoration project. I hoped you might show me, but I realize this is presumptuous of me." Jackson hesitated. His workshop was his private sanctuary, a place where he retreated when the weight of single parenthood and financial struggles became too much. It was also a mess, with tools scattered and parts organized in a system only he understood. But something in Olivia's expression, a genuine interest perhaps, or the slight uncertainty that seemed at odds with her usual confidence, made him relent. "Sure, I can show you. It's nothing fancy." The garage workshop was small, barely large enough to hold the partially restored Mustang. Every available inch of wall space was covered with tools, and makeshift shelving units held carefully labeled boxes of parts. Despite the limited space, the area was meticulously organized, a testament to Jackson's methodical nature. The Mustang itself sat in the center, its classic lines visible despite the work still needed. The engine compartment was immaculate, clearly where Jackson had focused most of his attention, while the interior remained stripped down to the metal, waiting for upholstery work he couldn't yet afford. Olivia walked slowly around the car, her appreciation evident. 1967 fastback, she murmured. 289 V8? Jackson couldn't hide his surprise. You know Mustangs? She smiled, trailing her fingers along the car's fender. My grandfather collected classic cars. He taught me to appreciate them when I was about Mia's age. She peered through the window at the bare interior. This is going to be gorgeous when it's finished. If it gets finished, Jackson said, more to himself than to her. Olivia glanced at him. What do you mean? Jackson hesitated, then decided there was no point in pretense. Just got notice that our rental's been sold. We have to be out by the end of January. He nodded toward the car, not sure where we'll end up, or if there'll be space for this project. I'm sorry to hear that, Olivia said, genuine concern in her voice. That's not much time to find a new place. It's how it goes. Jackson shrugged, trying to sound more nonchalant than he felt. We've moved before. We'll manage. Mia had wandered into the garage and was now sitting in the driver's seat of the Mustang, pretending to steer. Daddy says when it's done I can help drive it, she announced proudly. Jackson smiled despite his worries. When you're much older, pumpkin. Olivia watched their interaction, something unreadable crossing her face. After a moment she turned, back to Jackson. The craftsmanship here is exceptional. You do professional quality work. Used to be my profession, Jackson admitted. Before Sarah, my wife, got sick. Medical bills and raising Mia solo meant taking the factory job for stability. Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. But you still dream of getting back to it. It wasn't a question, but Jackson answered anyway. Someday. Open a proper restoration shop, maybe take on apprentices. He glanced around the cramped space, a far cry from this setup. Dreams have to start somewhere, Olivia said softly. She checked her watch. I should get going. Thank you for showing me your work, Jackson. It's truly impressive. As he walked her to her car, Olivia paused. About the Palmer Building project, the board is voting next week. Your input has been invaluable. Jackson nodded, unsure what to say. The Palmer Building seemed a world away from his immediate concerns about finding a new home. Good luck with it, he offered. It's a great vision for the place. Olivia smiled, then surprised him by reaching out to touch his arm briefly. Good luck with your housing search. I hope you find something soon. As he watched her drive away, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her visit than simple curiosity about his car. But with eviction looming and Mia's well-being to consider, he had more pressing matters to focus on. The following week brought a series of disappointments for Jackson. Every rental property he viewed was either well beyond his budget or unwilling to accept a tenant with less than perfect credit. The few affordable options were far from Mia's school, some even requiring a change of school districts altogether. On Friday afternoon, he sat at his kitchen table surrounded by rental listings, many already crossed out, when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Jackson Reynolds, he answered, expecting yet another rental agent with bad news. Mr. Reynolds, this is Patricia Holden from Riverbend Restoration. The woman's voice was brisk but friendly. I understand you've been on our waiting list for membership. Jackson sat up straighter. Yes, for about 18 months now. Well, I'm calling to let you know that a space has unexpectedly become available. If you're still interested, we'd like to offer it to you. Jackson's heart raced. Riverbend Restoration was the premier co-op shop in the county, offering members access to professional-grade equipment and workspace for classic car restoration. It was exactly what he needed for the Mustang, but the timing couldn't be worse. "I appreciate the offer, Ms. Holden, but with my current situation," he glanced at the rental listings scattered across the table. "I don't think I can take on the membership fees right now." "Oh," Patricia sounded surprised. "I was told your membership has already been covered for the first year." Jackson frowned in confusion. "Covered? By whom?" "An anonymous benefactor," Patricia explained. "They've arranged for a full membership plus dedicated storage space for your project. All you need to do is accept and sign the paperwork." Jackson's mind raced, immediately suspecting Olivia's involvement. It seemed too coincidental, her visit to see his car, her obvious wealth, and now this sudden opportunity. "Can you tell me anything about this benefactor?" he asked carefully. "I'm afraid not. They specifically requested anonymity." Patricia paused. "Mr. Reynolds, this is an unusual situation, but the benefactor was quite insistent. They mentioned your restoration skills and said you were working on a 1967 Mustang that needed proper space." That confirmed it. Only Olivia knew about both his Mustang and his interest in Riverbend. Jackson felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude, confusion, and a prickle of pride that made him hesitate. "Can I think about it and call you back?" "Of course. The offer stands until Monday." After hanging up, Jackson stared at the phone. While part of him wanted to immediately call Olivia and ask about her involvement, another part recognized what a lifeline this could be for his restoration work, especially with their housing. Situations so uncertain. That evening, after putting Mia to bed, Jackson sat in his workshop, running his hand along the Mustang's fender. The car had been Sarah's dream, something they'd talked about restoring together for years before finally finding the right one. After her death, continuing the project had become both a tribute to her and a way to process his grief. The thought of giving it up had been quietly destroying him, though he'd never admit it aloud. But accepting charity, especially from someone like Olivia Westbrook, felt complicated in ways he couldn't fully articulate. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but the content made the sender obvious. "Board approved the Palmer Building project today. Your insights made all the difference. Thank you. Olivia." Jackson stared at the message, his decision crystallizing. He texted back, "Congratulations. About Riverbend restoration. Was that you?" The reply came, quickly. "Can we talk about it? Coffee tomorrow." They arranged to meet at a small cafe the following morning. Jackson arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table and ordering a black coffee that he now nursed while waiting. When Olivia entered, she spotted him immediately and crossed the room with her characteristic purposeful stride. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Jackson didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Did you arrange the Riverbend membership?" Olivia met his gaze directly. "Yes," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why?" "Because you deserve the space to pursue your passion," she said simply. "Your skill level far exceeds that cramped garage, and with your housing situation uncertain. So it's charity," Jackson said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. Olivia frowned. "No, it's recognition of talent. Jackson, I've seen your work. What you're doing with that Mustang is craftsmanship that's becoming increasingly rare. Spaces like Riverbend exist to preserve those skills. And it just happens to coincide with me losing my housing and not being able to afford the membership fees on my own." "The timing worked out," Olivia acknowledged, "but that doesn't change the fact that you deserve the opportunity." Jackson studied her, trying to understand her motivation. "Most executives I know wouldn't give a factory worker a second thought, let alone arrange something like this." Olivia's expression softened. "I'm not most executives. And you're not just a factory worker, Jackson. You're a skilled craftsman who's had some tough breaks." She hesitated, then added, "My grandfather would have loved your work. He believed in preserving skills like yours." Something in her tone, a vulnerability he hadn't heard before, made Jackson pause. "This is important to you, isn't it? Beyond just helping me out." Olivia nodded slowly. "The Palmer Building project is about honoring Riverdale's industrial heritage while creating something new. What you're doing with that Mustang is the same principle, preserving something beautiful from the past and giving it new life." She leaned forward slightly. "Consider the membership an investment in that shared vision, not charity." Jackson absorbed her words, his resistance softening despite himself. "I'm not comfortable with handouts." "It's not a handout," Olivia countered. "It's a resource that matches your talent. Besides," she added with a small smile, "the membership is non-refundable. If you don't use it, someone else will, but the money's spent either way." Jackson couldn't help but chuckle at her persistence. "You're not going to take no for an answer, are you?" "I've been told I'm stubborn," she admitted. "A family trait, unfortunately." They talked for another hour, the conversation shifting from Riverbend to the Palmer Building project to their shared appreciation for vintage machinery. Jackson found himself relaxing in her company, impressed by her genuine knowledge and passion for preservation. By the time they parted ways, Jackson had tentatively agreed to accept the Riverbend membership as a professional resource, he'd insisted, not a gift. Olivia had simply smiled, seeming pleased with the compromise. What Jackson didn't realize was that Olivia's plans extended far beyond the Riverbend membership. As she drove away from their meeting, her mind was already working on the next phase of a vision that had begun forming the moment she'd seen his restoration work. The following weeks brought significant changes for both of them. Jackson accepted the Riverbend membership and began moving his Mustang project to the new space, marveling at the professional-grade equipment now at his disposal. The other members, mostly retired mechanics and dedicated hobbyists, welcomed him warmly, especially after seeing the quality of his work on the Mustang. Meanwhile, Olivia threw herself into the Palmer Building renovation. The board had approved her vision with several stipulations, the most significant being a tight timeline to prove community engagement. She found herself frequently consulting Jackson on technical aspects of the vintage machinery, which led to regular meetings that gradually evolved from strictly professional to something more comfortable. These meetings didn't go unnoticed. Richard Westbrook observed his daughter's growing friendship with the factory worker with increasing concern, though he kept his opinions to himself for the time being. One evening in mid-December, Jackson was working late at Riverbend, meticulously reassembling the Mustang's dashboard, when he heard the main door open. Most members had gone home hours ago, so he glanced up in surprise to see Olivia walking toward him, carrying 2 takeout cups from the local coffee shop. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing him one of the cups. "Patricia mentioned you've been here since this morning." Jackson accepted the coffee gratefully. "Time gets away from me here. There's always one more thing to finish." He gestured to the dashboard. "Got the original gauges working again today." Olivia peered at his handiwork, genuinely impressed. "It's coming together beautifully." She hesitated, then asked, "Any luck with the housing search?" Jackson's expression dimmed. "Not really. Everything in Mia's school district is either taken or out of my price range. I might have to move us to the north side and transfer her mid-year." He didn't add that the north side would mean a 40-minute commute to Riverdale Manufacturing, or that Mia had cried at the prospect of leaving her friends. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "Actually, that's partly why I stopped by. I might have a solution, if you're open to it." Jackson raised an eyebrow, setting down his coffee. "I'm listening." "There's a property connected to the Palmer Building, the old caretaker's house. It's small but in good condition, and it's within walking distance of Mia's school. She pulled out her phone, showing him photos of a modest but charming craftsman-style house. It's part of the overall development project but sits on a separate parcel. We're not planning to use it for at least 2 years. Jackson scrolled through the photos, immediately seeing the potential. And you're telling me this because I'd like to offer it to you as a rental, Olivia said simply. Standard lease, fair market rent. You'd be doing us a favor, actually. An occupied property is better than a vacant one, especially for insurance purposes. Jackson handed back the phone, his expression cautious. This feels like another convenient solution, Olivia. She met his gaze directly. It's a practical arrangement that benefits us both. You need housing. We need a responsible tenant for a property that would otherwise sit empty. The fact that it would allow you to stay in Mia's school district is a bonus. Jackson considered her offer, weighing his pride against his daughter's well-being. What's the catch? No catch. Standard lease, first and last month's deposit. Olivia hesitated, then added, though I should mention that the property includes a detached garage that's significantly larger than your current setup. It used to be a workshop for the caretaker. Despite himself, Jackson smiled. Of course it does. Olivia returned his smile, a spark of mischief in her eyes. Purely coincidental. Nothing seems coincidental with you, Jackson observed, but there was no bitterness in his tone. Let me think about it. Of course, the property's not going anywhere. She glanced at her watch. I should let you get back to work. Don't stay too late. Mia will be waiting. As she turned to leave, Jackson called after her. Thank you, Olivia. Not just for this, but for everything these past few weeks. She paused, looking back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're welcome, Jackson. After she left, Jackson returned to the dashboard, but his mind was elsewhere. The housing offer was tempting, almost too perfect, which made him wary. Yet he couldn't deny that Olivia Westbrook had shown herself to be genuinely kind and thoughtful, defying his initial assumptions about her. What Jackson didn't know was that as Olivia drove away from Riverbend, she was already formulating the next phase of a plan that had been taking shape in her mind since their first meeting. A plan that would either bridge the gap between their worlds or widen it irrevocably. The caretaker's house proved even more charming in person than in photographs. Jackson stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the original leaded glass windows, casting patterns across the hardwood floors. The house was modest. 2 bedrooms, a small but updated kitchen, a cozy living room with a brick fireplace, but it felt solid and welcoming in a way their current rental never had. Mia had already claimed the smaller bedroom, racing around the empty space, planning where her bed and bookshelf would go, with the boundless enthusiasm of an 8-year-old. And my school is just down that street, she asked, pointing out the window. Just 3 blocks away, Jackson confirmed. You could walk there when the weather's nice. Mia's face lit up with delight. Can we live here, Daddy? Please? Jackson smiled, his decision already made. The rent Olivia had proposed was fair, even slightly below market for the neighborhood, and the house would allow Mia to stay at her school. Most importantly, it would give them stability they hadn't had in years. I think we can, Pumpkin. Later that afternoon, he signed the lease in Olivia's office at Westbrook Industries. The formal setting, all glass and steel and corporate efficiency, served as a stark reminder of the different worlds they inhabited, despite their growing friendship. Everything look acceptable? Olivia asked as he reviewed the documents. More than acceptable, Jackson admitted, signing the final page. It means a lot, Olivia, especially to Mia. Olivia smiled, her professional demeanor softening. I'm glad it worked out. We can arrange for you to move in this weekend, if that timing works for you. Jackson nodded, noticing for the first time how tired she looked. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, barely concealed by makeup, and tension lined her shoulders. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You seem exhausted." Olivia blinked, surprised by his observation. "Just busy with the Palmer building project. The board wants progress reports every week, and we're pushing to stay ahead of schedule." Jackson studied her for a moment longer. "You're under a lot of pressure to make this work, aren't you?" "It's part of the job," she said dismissively. "Besides, I believe in the project." Before Jackson could respond, the office door opened and Richard Westbrook strode in, his gaze landing first on Jackson, then shifting to his daughter with an unreadable expression. "Dad," Olivia said, clearly surprised. "I didn't know you were coming by." "Clearly," Richard replied, his tone cool but polite. "I was hoping to discuss the contractor bids for Palmer, but I see you're in a meeting." Olivia quickly made introductions. "Dad, this is Jackson Reynolds. He's been consulting on the machinery restoration aspects of the project. Jackson, my father, Richard Westbrook." Jackson stood, extending his hand. "Sir." Richard shook his hand with the practiced grip of a man who had spent decades in boardrooms. "Reynolds, from Riverdale Manufacturing, correct?" "Yes, sir. Line supervisor on the East Assembly floor." Richard nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "And now consulting on historic machinery, versatile." Olivia intervened smoothly. "Jackson's expertise has been invaluable for the authentic restoration aspects of the project. His insights on the Palmer equipment have already saved us from several costly mistakes." Richard's gaze shifted between them, something calculating in his eyes. "I see. Well, I won't interrupt further. Olivia, find me when you're finished here." With a curt nod, he left the office. A tense silence followed his departure. Jackson finally broke it. "Your father doesn't seem thrilled about my involvement." Olivia sighed, rubbing her temple. "My father is traditional in his views about corporate hierarchy. Don't take it personally." But Jackson had spent enough time on factory floors to recognize when he was being assessed and found wanting. "He thinks I'm overstepping. What he thinks doesn't matter," Olivia said firmly. "I'm leading this project and I value your input." Jackson nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. As he gathered the signed lease documents, he couldn't shake the feeling that Richard Westbrook's brief appearance had somehow altered the dynamic between him and Olivia, drawing a line that neither had acknowledged before. The weekend move to the caretaker's house went smoothly, with several of Jackson's co-workers from Riverdale Manufacturing volunteering to help. By Sunday evening, the small house was beginning to feel like home, with Mia's colorful artwork already taped to the refrigerator and their modest furniture arranged in the living room. The detached garage workshop, however, was what truly captured Jackson's imagination. Nearly twice the size of his previous space, with high ceilings, good lighting, and a proper ventilation system, it was better than he could have hoped for. He spent Sunday night organizing his tools, planning how he would set up his workstations, envisioning the progress he could make on the Mustang now that he had adequate space. He was so absorbed in his planning that he almost missed the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. When he stepped outside, he was surprised to see Olivia exiting her vehicle, a large gift bag in her hand. "Housewarming," she explained, holding up the bag with a slightly self-conscious smile. "It's a tradition, right?" Jackson invited her in, watching with amusement as Mia immediately commandeered Olivia's attention to show her the new bedroom arrangement. The easy rapport between them warmed something in his chest. Mia had few female influences in her life since Sarah's death, and she clearly adored Olivia. After Mia's enthusiastic tour, the three of them sat in the living room, sharing the fresh-baked cookies Olivia had brought as her housewarming gift. The domesticity of the scenes struck Jackson as both comfortable and strange. Olivia Westbrook, with her designer clothes and corporate position, sitting cross-legged on his second-hand couch, laughing at Mia's school stories as if there were nowhere else she'd rather be. When Mia finally went to bed, Jackson walked Olivia out to her car, the night air crisp with the promise of winter. "Thank you for coming by," he said. Mia was thrilled. Olivia smiled, leaning against her car. "Door, she's a wonderful child, Jackson. You're doing an amazing job with her." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with things unsaid. Jackson found himself studying Olivia's face in the soft glow of the porch light, noting how different. She looked away from the corporate setting, more relaxed, more genuine. "Your father doesn't approve of our friendship," he said finally, voicing what had been on his mind since their encounter in her office. Olivia's expression grew serious. "My father has very fixed ideas about how things should be, but I make my own decisions. Even when those decisions complicate things," she met his gaze directly. "Some complications are worth it." The weight of her words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Finally, Olivia straightened, reaching for her car door. "I should go. The Palmer building contractors are starting early tomorrow." Jackson nodded, stepping back. "Drive safely." As he watched her car disappear down the quiet street, Jackson felt a strange mix of contentment and unease. His life had changed dramatically in the weeks since their chance encounter in the rain. All positive changes, certainly, but moving at a pace that left him slightly breathless. And beneath it all ran a current of something deeper, something neither he nor Olivia had openly addressed. The growing connection between them that defied the boundaries of their different worlds. What Jackson couldn't know was that as Olivia drove away, her mind was wrestling with the same questions, and with one more that would soon change everything between them, a decision she had made that would either bridge their worlds permanently or tear them irrevocably apart. January arrived with bitter cold and swirling snow that transformed Riverdale into a winter wonderland. The Palmer building renovation had begun in earnest, its windows now covered with construction tarps, the sounds of machinery and workers echoing across the otherwise quiet street. The project had gathered momentum, with local papers running, features on the historic preservation effort, and community college administrators expressing interest in the training facility component. For Jackson, the new year had brought a rhythm he hadn't experienced in years. The caretaker's house felt more like home every day, with Mia thriving at her school just blocks away. His evening and weekend hours were split between Riverbend restoration, where the Mustang was steadily taking shape, and occasional consulting visits to the Palmer building, where Olivia sought his expertise on the vintage machinery being preserved. The week since moving had carried a strange double life. His days at Riverdale Manufacturing remained unchanged, the same repetitive tasks and weary co-workers, but his evenings had transformed. Between the proper workspace at Riverbend and the growing friendship with Olivia, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death: possibility. On a particularly frigid Tuesday evening, Jackson was at Riverbend, carefully installing the refurbished gauge cluster into the Mustang's dashboard when Patricia Holden approached him. "Jackson, do you have a minute?" she asked, her expression uncharacteristically serious. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sure, what's up?" Patricia glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "I just had a rather unusual conversation with Richard Westbrook." Jackson stilled. "Olivia's father, what did he want?" "Information about your membership arrangement." Patricia's brow furrowed. "He seemed particularly interested in who was funding it and why you were granted priority over others on the waiting list." A cold knot formed in Jackson's stomach. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that an anonymous benefactor arranged it, and that your restoration skills merited the opportunity." She hesitated. "Jackson, I don't know what's happening between you and the Westbrooks, but Richard made it clear that Westbrook Industries is considering a substantial donation to Riverbend, contingent on certain operational reviews. The implication was clear. He's using money to pressure you. Patricia sighed, looking uncomfortable. I wanted you to know. Your membership is secure. We have a contract, but Mr. Westbrook seemed determined. Jackson nodded, thanking her for the warning. After she left, he sat motionless beside the Mustang, the gauge cluster forgotten in his hands. Richard Westbrook's interest in his arrangement with Riverbend could only mean one thing. He was investigating Jackson's connection to Olivia. That night, as snow fell silently outside, Jackson sat at his kitchen table long after Mia had gone. To bed, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The renovation at Palmer Building, the Riverbend membership, the caretaker's house. All threads connecting him to Olivia Westbrook, threads that her father was clearly trying to unravel. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Progress meeting for Palmer tomorrow at 3. Could use your input on the machinery layout. Free? Jackson stared at the message, wondering if he should mention Richard's visit to Riverbend. After a moment's hesitation, he simply replied, I'll be there. Across town, in the Westbrook estate, Olivia sat in her father's study, facing his displeasure with outward calm that belied her inner tension. Your involvement with this factory worker has gone beyond professional consultation, Olivia, Richard said, pacing before the fireplace. The rental arrangement, the mysterious membership at that restoration club. Do you think I wouldn't find out? Olivia maintained her composure. I've done nothing improper, Dad. Jackson Reynolds has valuable expertise that benefits the Palmer project. And your interest in him is purely professional. Richard's tone was skeptical. You've never shown this level of investment in an employee before. Jackson isn't just an employee, Olivia countered. He's a skilled craftsman with insights we need. The housing arrangement is a standard lease, benefiting both parties. Richard stopped pacing to face her directly. And the Riverbend membership? The anonymous benefactor who just happened to specify him for priority consideration. Olivia met his gaze steadily. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm concerned that you're allowing personal feelings to cloud your professional judgment. Richard's voice softened slightly. You've worked hard to prove yourself in this company, Olivia. Don't jeopardize that for some inappropriate attachment. Anger flashed through her. There's nothing inappropriate about recognizing talent and creating opportunities for it to flourish. That's good business. Richard studied her for a long moment. The board is watching the Palmer project closely. Any hint of impropriety or misallocation of resources could jeopardize everything you've worked for. He returned to his desk, effectively dismissing her. I trust you'll reconsider the wisdom of these entanglements. Olivia left without another word, but her father's warning echoed in her mind. She'd always known there would be resistance to her vision for Palmer, not just the physical renovation, but what it represented, a bridge between Riverdale's industrial past and its future, between different social classes, between preservation and innovation. What she hadn't anticipated was how personal that vision had become, inextricably linked with her growing feelings for Jackson Reynolds. The following afternoon, Jackson arrived at the Palmer building for the progress meeting. The interior had been transformed since his last visit. Structural repairs were well underway. The vintage machinery had been carefully positioned for restoration, and architectural plans were pinned to temporary walls throughout the space. Olivia was in the center of it all, discussing technical specifications with contractors when she spotted him. Her face brightened as she excused herself and crossed to greet him. Jackson, thank you for coming. We're finalizing the layout for the working museum section, and I wanted your input before decisions are locked in. He followed her to a table covered with blueprints, trying to focus on the technical matters at hand, rather than the conversation he knew they needed to have. For the next hour, they worked alongside the project team, discussing machine placement, power requirements, and restoration priorities. Olivia was in her element, confident, knowledgeable, seamlessly bridging technical details and broader vision. Jackson couldn't help but admire her skill in navigating the complex project, earning respect from contractors and engineers alike, despite her youth and gender in a field dominated by older men. As the meeting concluded and team members dispersed, Olivia turned to Jackson with a smile that faltered when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. Jackson glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Your father came to Riverbend, asking questions about my membership." Olivia's face fell. "I was afraid of that. He confronted me about it last night." "Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed, rubbing her temple. "I was hoping to handle it myself. My father can be difficult, but he usually respects my boundaries eventually." "This doesn't feel like respecting boundaries," Jackson said. "He's investigating me, Olivia, using his influence to pressure Riverbend." Olivia's expression hardened. "I'll speak with him. Again, he has no right to interfere." "That's not the point." Jackson lowered his voice further. "We need to be honest about what's happening here. All these connections, the project, Riverbend, the house, they're creating complications neither of us anticipated." She studied him for a moment. "Are you saying you regret accepting my help?" "No," Jackson said firmly. "I'm saying we need to acknowledge why your father is concerned. This isn't just about the Palmer project anymore, is it?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Olivia's gaze dropped briefly before meeting his again. "No," she admitted quietly, "it's not." A charged silence stretched between them, broken when one of the contractors called for Olivia's attention on an urgent matter. She excused herself, promising to continue their conversation later, leaving Jackson standing amid the renovation activity, more uncertain than ever about the path forward. That evening, as Jackson worked in his new garage workshop, the sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. He stepped outside to find Olivia's car pulling into the driveway, a determined expression on her face as she emerged. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, "properly, without interruptions." Inside the house, Jackson made coffee while Olivia paced the small living room, tension evident in every movement. When they finally sat at the kitchen table, facing each other with steaming mugs between them, the weight of unspoken words filled the room. "My father is trying to pressure me into ending our association," Olivia began bluntly. "He believes I'm compromising my professional standing by becoming too involved with you." Jackson nodded, unsurprised. "And what do you think?" She met his gaze directly. "I think my father comes from a world where people are defined by their job titles and bank accounts, where crossing those lines is unthinkable." Her hands tightened around her mug. "But that's not the world I want to live in." "Olivia," Jackson said carefully, "your father isn't entirely wrong. Look at all this from his perspective. His daughter suddenly taking an intense interest in a factory worker, arranging special opportunities, rental properties. It looks like I care about you," she interrupted, "which I do." The simple admission hung in the air between them. Jackson exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to reach for her hand. "I care about you too," he said quietly, "but that doesn't change the reality we're facing. You're Olivia Westbrook. I'm a line supervisor who can barely make ends meet. There are reasons people in our positions don't typically get involved." "Traditional reasons," Olivia countered. "Social expectations, class boundaries. Are those really values you want to uphold?" "It's not about values," Jackson said. It's about practicality. Your world and mine, they're different. The Palmer project is already pushing boundaries. If we add personal involvement to the mix, the project could be at risk, Olivia finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's what you're worried about. Jackson nodded. Your father made it clear to Patricia that Westbrook funding could depend on operational reviews. If he's willing to use that leverage at Riverbend, what might he do with Palmer? This project matters to the community, to the preservation of skills and history we both value. I don't want to be the reason it fails. Olivia was silent for a long moment, processing his words. So what are you suggesting? That we maintain a strictly professional relationship? Pretend there's nothing else between us? Before Jackson could answer, the sound of small footsteps padded down the hallway. Mia appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Daddy, I had a bad dream. She spotted Olivia, and her face brightened despite her sleepiness. Olivia, are you staying for a sleepover? Olivia's expression softened immediately. Not tonight, sweetheart. I just came to talk to your dad about some work things. Oh. Mia's disappointment was evident. Next time, maybe? Jackson exchanged a look with Olivia, the simple question highlighting the complexity of their situation. Let's get you back to bed, Pumpkin, he said gently. Say goodnight to Olivia. After tucking Mia back in, Jackson returned to find Olivia standing by the window, gazing out at the snow-covered yard. She turned as he entered, her expression resolute. I have a proposition, she said, one that might address the concerns while allowing us to continue working together. Jackson raised an eyebrow, gesturing for her to continue. The Palmer project needs a dedicated restoration specialist, someone who understands the machinery and can oversee the educational components once we're operational. The board has approved the position, but we haven't filled it. She took a deep breath. I want to offer it to you. Jackson stared at her. You want to hire me? It would be a legitimate position based on your qualifications, Olivia explained. Better pay than Riverdale Manufacturing, more aligned with your skills and no more conflicts of interest. You'd be part of the Palmer team officially, not just a consultant. And your father would have to acknowledge the professional nature of our relationship. She stepped closer. Jackson, this isn't just for us. You deserve work that values your craftsmanship. The Palmer project needs someone with your expertise. It makes sense on every level. Jackson wanted to believe her, wanted to embrace the elegant solution she offered, but something held him back. And if I say no, if I want to keep my job at Riverdale, maintain the boundaries between our worlds? Olivia's expression faltered slightly. Is that what you want? He didn't answer immediately, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Finally, he said, I need time to think about this. It's not just my future at stake, it's Mia's too. Olivia nodded, understanding but clearly disappointed. Of course, the position is yours if you want it, whenever. You decide. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, Jackson, I've never believed that someone's job title defines their worth. My grandfather started as a factory worker before building Westbrook Industries. He never forgot where he came from, and he taught me to value craftsmanship and integrity above social standing. She met his gaze. Just something to consider. After she left, Jackson remained awake long into the night, weighing possibilities and consequences. The job offer was tempting, work that aligned with his skills and passion, better pay, respectable hours. But he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting would somehow compromise his independence, binding him further to Olivia and the Westbrook influence in ways he couldn't fully control. The next morning brought unexpected clarity in the form of a company-wide email from Riverdale Manufacturing Management. Due to restructuring, substantial layoffs were planned for the coming month. Production would be consolidated, with many Positions, including several supervisory roles, eliminated. Jackson stared at the screen in disbelief. After years of steady, if unfulfilling work, the stability he'd counted on was suddenly in jeopardy. He thought of the house, of Mia's school, of the Mustang project at Riverbend, and felt the ground shifting beneath his feet once again. As he drove to work that morning, his mind racing with contingency plans, Jackson didn't notice the sleek, black car tailing him at a discreet distance, Richard Westbrook's personal vehicle, driven by his longtime assistant. The layoff announcement sent ripples of anxiety through Riverdale manufacturing. The factory floor hummed with nervous whispers and speculation about which departments would be hit hardest. By lunchtime, Jackson had fielded dozens of questions, from his team offering what reassurance he could while battling his own uncertainty. In the break room, he found Bill Thompson, the floor manager who had originally assigned him to the Palmer building consultation. "Any insider information about the cuts?" Jackson asked, keeping his voice low. Bill grimaced, glancing around before responding. "Word is they're targeting the older assembly lines first, including yours. Nothing official yet, but department. Heads are already making lists." Jackson's stomach tightened. Timeline. 2 weeks for the first round, maybe sooner. Bill studied him with sympathy. "You've got that kid to support, Reynolds. Might want to start looking elsewhere, just in case." Elsewhere. The word echoed in Jackson's mind as he returned to the production floor. Olivia's job. Offer now seemed less like a complication and more like a lifeline, one he might not have the luxury of refusing. That evening, Jackson sat with Mia at the kitchen table, helping her with homework while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. He wouldn't worry her with adult concerns about job security. She'd already faced enough upheaval in her young life. "Daddy," Mia said, looking up from her arithmetic, "is Olivia your girlfriend?" The question caught him completely off guard. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" Mia shrugged with childlike frankness. "You look at her the way Tommy Wilson's. Dad looks at his new wife, and she brings us cookies and helped us get this house. Penny at school says that means she likes you." Jackson cleared his throat, unsure how to navigate this conversation. "Olivia is a friend who's been very kind to us. She's also someone I work with sometimes. It's complicated." "Because she's rich and you're not?" Mia asked innocently. Jackson stared at his daughter, startled by her perception. "Where did you hear that?" "I heard Mrs. Holden at Riverbend telling Mr. Davis that you and Olivia were from different worlds because her family owns the factory where you work." Mia tilted her head. "But that doesn't seem important. She's nice and she likes our car, and she remembers what flavor ice cream I like." Out of the mouths of babes, Jackson thought wryly. "Sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be," he admitted. "Now how about we finish this math homework?" Later, after Mia was asleep, Jackson found himself in the garage workshop, hands moving automatically over the Mustang's interior panels as his mind worked through his options. If the layoffs hit his department, Olivia's job offer would be the most straightforward solution. Work he was qualified for, enjoyed, and that would maintain stability for Mia. But accepting would mean acknowledging the shifting nature of his relationship with Olivia, confronting whatever was growing between them despite the complications. It would mean facing Richard Westbrook's disapproval, potentially disrupting the Palmer project he had come to believe in. He was so absorbed in these thoughts that he almost missed the sound of a car pulling up outside. Thinking it might be Olivia returning to continue their conversation, he stepped outside, only to find Richard Westbrook himself emerging from a black sedan. "Mr. Reynolds," Richard said, his tone coolly polite. "I was hoping we might have a word." Jackson masked his surprise, gesturing toward the house. "Would you like to come inside?" Richard glanced at the modest home, then shook his head. "I prefer to keep this brief. May we speak here?" They stood in the driveway, winter's chill settling around them. Richard surveyed the property with calculating eyes before turning his attention to Jackson. "I'll be direct, Mr. Reynolds. My daughter has developed a certain fascination with you and your work. She's even created a position at the Palmer Project specifically for you, I'm told." Jackson maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. "Olivia mentioned the position, yes. Olivia has always had a soft heart," Richard continued. "She sees potential where others might see limitations. It's an admirable quality, if sometimes impractical." "With all due respect, sir, what's your point?" Richard's expression hardened slightly at the directness. "My point, Mr. Reynolds, is that while my daughter may be temporarily captivated by your restoration skills and your key personal story, the reality is that your worlds are fundamentally incompatible. That's for Olivia and me to determine, isn't it?" "Is it?" Richard raised an eyebrow. "Consider this from a practical standpoint. Olivia has spent her entire life preparing to lead Westbrook Industries someday. Her connections, her education, her social circle, all carefully cultivated to support that future. How would you fit into that world? At company functions, board meetings, charity galas?" Jackson remained silent, the questions hitting closer to his own doubts than he wanted to admit. Richard continued, his voice softening slightly. "I'm not questioning your character or your abilities, Reynolds. I'm simply pointing out the practical challenges of crossing such established boundaries. Challenges that would eventually affect not only you and Olivia, but your daughter as well." The mention of Mia sent a protective surge through Jackson. "Leave my daughter out of this. I'm merely suggesting you consider her well-being," Richard countered smoothly. "Children need stability, consistency, the scrutiny that would come with an unusual connection to the Westbrook family might not provide that." Before Jackson could respond, Richard reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "I have an alternative proposition. Westbrook Industries has connections to several prestigious restoration facilities across the country. This contains an offer for a position at Barrett Classic Restorations in Chicago, full benefits, substantial salary increase, and an advanced apprenticeship program that would allow you to refine your craft." He held out the envelope. "A fresh start for you and your daughter in a setting that truly values your skills. No complications, no scrutiny, no conflicting loyalties." Jackson stared at the envelope but made no move to take it. "And if I decline?" Richard's expression remained impassive. "Then you proceed as you see fit, but I should mention that the restructuring at Riverdale Manufacturing will be extensive. Many supervisory positions will be eliminated. The economy being what it is, finding comparable work locally might prove challenging." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Jackson recognized the leverage Richard was applying, offering a golden escape route, while simultaneously threatening his livelihood if he remained. It was calculated, manipulative, and remarkably effective, especially with the Riverdale layoffs looming. "Take some time to consider it," Richard said, placing the envelope on the hood of Jackson's truck. "The opportunity will remain open for 1 week. For what it's worth, Mr. Reynolds, I believe you'd thrive in Chicago. Your talent deserves recognition in the right context." With that, Richard returned to his car, leaving Jackson standing in the driveway, the envelope illuminated by moonlight on his truck's hood. Inside the envelope, Jackson found exactly what Richard had promised: a formal job offer from Barrett Classic Restorations, one of the most prestigious restoration facilities in the Midwest. The salary was nearly double what he earned at Riverdale Manufacturing, with housing assistance for the relocation, excellent benefits, and educational opportunities that would allow him to truly master his craft. It was, in many ways, the dream opportunity he'd long abandoned hope of finding, but the context made it feel like a bribe, or worse, a threat wrapped in generosity. Jackson didn't sleep that night. his mind cycling through the impossible choices. Before him, accept Olivia's position at Parma and face Richard's opposition, potentially jeopardizing the project itself. Take the Chicago offer and walk away from the connections he'd built in Riverdale, including whatever was growing between him and Olivia. Or reject both and likely face unemployment when the Riverdale manufacturing cuts came down. Each option carried consequences not just for him, but for Mia. Each required sacrificing something that mattered, and each forced him to confront what he truly wanted for his future, and whether Olivia Westbrook was part of that vision, complications and all. Dawn found him still awake, the Chicago offer on the kitchen table, his coffee gone cold as he watched the first light of day illuminate the backyard workshop where the Mustang now sat partially disassembled. The car had once been a symbol of his past with Sarah, a tribute to what he'd lost. Somehow in recent months, it had transformed into something else, a bridge to a possible future, one with purpose and passion and unexpected connection. The question now was whether that future lay in Riverdale or Chicago, with Olivia or without her, embracing complications or avoiding them entirely. As he prepared Mia's breakfast and packed her lunch for school, Jackson made his decision. He would speak with Olivia honestly, completely, before choosing any path forward. Whatever complications existed between them, whatever boundaries separated their worlds, they deserved the chance to face them together, eyes open and intentions clear. What Jackson couldn't know was that at that very moment, Olivia Westbrook was facing a crisis of her own, one that would force both their hands before any honest conversation could take place. The Parma building stood shrouded in morning fog as Jackson pulled into the parking lot. His conversation with Richard Westbrook had left him restless, the Chicago offer weighing heavily on his mind as he drove Mia to school. Now, with determination fueling his steps, he approached the historic structure where he hoped to find Olivia. Instead, he found chaos. Construction workers and project managers huddled in concerned groups, their voices hushed but urgent. Jackson spotted Gerald, the site foreman, and made his way over. "What's happening?" Jackson asked. Gerald grimaced. "Board called an emergency meeting last night. Funding's been frozen pending review. All work suspended until further notice." Jackson's chest tightened. "Why? The project was on schedule, under budget." Gerald shrugged. "Above my pay grade. All I know is Ms. Westbrook was called in at dawn and hasn't come out yet." He nodded toward the temporary offices set up in a trailer at the edge of the property. "She's been in there with the board representatives for hours." Jackson thanked him and moved toward the trailer, anxiety building with each step. This couldn't be coincidence, not the day after Richard Westbrook had tried to bribe him out of town, not when the project had been progressing so smoothly until now. As he approached, the trailer door swung open. Two men in expensive suits emerged, followed by Olivia. Even from a distance, Jackson could see the tension in her posture, the careful control in her expression that masked something deeper, anger, perhaps, or desperation. She spotted him immediately, surprise flashing across her face before she composed herself and spoke briefly to the board representatives. After they departed, she walked toward Jackson, her steps measured, professional. "Jackson," she greeted him, voice carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I heard about the funding freeze," he said. "What happened?" Olivia glanced around, then gestured toward her car. "Not here." Inside her vehicle, the professional veneer cracked. Olivia pressed her palms against the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. "The board is questioning the financial viability of the entire project," she said, voice tight. "They've ordered a complete review of all expenditures, contractual arrangements, and staffing decisions." Jackson felt a sinking in his stomach. "This is about me, isn't it? Your father." "Not just my father," Olivia cut him off. though he certainly didn't oppose the review. They're specifically examining my judgment regarding the project's direction and personnel choices. She turned to face him fully, her expression pained. They've raised concerns about our personal relationship potentially influencing business decisions, specifically the position I offered you. A position I haven't even accepted, Jackson pointed out. It doesn't matter. The mere suggestion was enough. Olivia ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident. They're using it as a pretext to question everything, the preservation focus, the educational component, all of it. Jackson absorbed this, the weight of Richard Westbrook's warning becoming clearer. "Your father came to see me last night," he admitted. Olivia went still. "What? Why didn't you call me?" "It was late, and I wanted to talk to you in person." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the Chicago offer. He brought this. Olivia scanned the document, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "A job in Chicago," she said flatly. "Prestigious, well paid, far from Riverdale." She looked up at him. "Far from me." That was the point, I think. Jackson reclaimed the document, folding it carefully. "Your father made it clear that our worlds are too different, that any connection between us would eventually damage both the project and you." "And you believed him?" Hurt flickered across her face. "I believed that he'd do whatever necessary to protect what he thinks is best for you." Jackson held her gaze, including sabotaging the Palmer project to prove his point. Olivia fell silent, the reality of their situation settling between them. Finally, she asked, "Are you going to take it, the Chicago position?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jackson had come to the Palmer building that morning, intending to have an honest conversation with Olivia about their future, about the feelings growing between them despite the complications. Now, with the project in jeopardy and Richard Westbrook's manipulations laid bare, that conversation seemed both more urgent and more impossible. "I don't know," he admitted. "Riverdale Manufacturing is cutting my position. Mia needs stability. The Chicago job is everything you've worked for," Olivia finished softly. "I understand." But her eyes said otherwise. They held disappointment, resignation, the beginning of goodbye. Jackson reached for her hand before he could think better of it. "That's not all I've been working for," he said quietly. "Olivia, these past months, the project, Riverbend, even the house, they've given me something I thought I'd lost when Sarah died. A sense of possibility, of future, and a lot of that is because of you." Olivia's fingers tightened around his. "Then stay. We'll fight for the project together. My father doesn't get to dictate my life or my—" She stopped, catching herself before naming what existed between them. "Your what?" Jackson pressed gently. "My heart," she whispered, the admission both vulnerable and defiant. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Then Olivia's phone rang, shattering the fragile connection. She answered, her expression shifting from intimate to professional in an instant. "Yes, I understand. I'll be right there." She hung up, turning apologetic eyes to Jackson. "The contractors need decisions about whether to remove equipment during the freeze. I have to go." "Of course." Jackson released her hand, reality reasserting itself. "We'll talk later?" Olivia nodded, though uncertainty shadowed her eyes. Later. As Jackson watched her return to the building, purpose in her stride despite the morning's setbacks, he felt the crossroads before him more acutely than ever. Chicago represented security, professional recognition, a clean slate. Riverdale held Olivia, possibility, and complications neither of them might be able to overcome. The choice seemed impossible, yet somehow, driving away from the Palmer building, Jackson felt the first stirrings of clarity forming in his mind. By the time Jackson picked up Mia from school that afternoon, word of the Palmer building project freeze had spread throughout Riverdale. Local social media buzzed with speculation, much of it centered on Westbrook Industries' commitment to community development. Several longtime residents, including Henry Davis, owner of the hardware store that had supplied materials for the renovation, expressed concern about the economic impact if the project were abandoned. "Everyone's talking about the old building downtown," Mia reported as she climbed into the truck. "Mrs. Wilson said it might not become a museum anymore, but you said it would, right, Daddy?" Jackson chose his words carefully. "There are some complications with the project right now, Pumpkin, but a lot of people are working hard to make sure it happens." "Including Olivia?" Mia asked, perceptive as always, especially Olivia. At home, while Mia worked on homework, Jackson sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open to the Chicago offer. He'd reviewed it a dozen times already, calculating what such a position would mean for their lives: financial security, professional growth, excellent schools for Mia. On paper, it was everything he should want, yet his mind kept returning to the Palmer building, to Riverbend, to the community that had slowly embraced him and Mia over the past months, to Olivia and the possibility they hadn't yet fully explored. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Holden. "Heard about Palmer. Your Riverbend membership secure regardless. Community rallying. Henry Davis organizing meeting at Town Hall tonight. Project importance." Jackson stared at the message, surprised by the swift community response. Before he could reply, a call came through. Bill Thompson from Riverdale Manufacturing. "Reynolds," Bill said without preamble. "Layoff lists just came down. Your department's being consolidated. Position eliminated effective 2 weeks from Friday." The news, though expected, still landed like a blow. "Thanks for the heads up, Bill." "There's more," Bill continued. "Word is Westbrook Sr. intervened personally on the restructuring plans. Unusual for him to get involved at our level." After the call ended, Jackson sat motionless, the pieces falling into place. Richard Westbrook wasn't leaving anything to chance. He was systematically eliminating Jackson's options in Riverdale, forcing him toward Chicago. The manipulation angered him, not just for himself, but for Olivia, whose vision for the Palmer building was being sacrificed in this power play, for the community that had invested hope in the project, for Mia, who had finally found stability in their new home. Decision crystallizing, Jackson grabbed his keys. "Mia," he called, "we need to make a quick trip downtown." The town hall meeting was already underway when they arrived. The modest building packed with Riverdale residents. Henry Davis stood at the front, passionately outlining the economic benefits of the Palmer project and the potential loss if Westbrook Industries abandoned it. "This isn't just about preserving old machines," Henry was saying. "It's about preserving Riverdale's identity, our industrial heritage, while creating new opportunities for the next generation." Jackson guided Mia to seats near the back, scanning the crowd for Olivia, but not finding her. As Henry concluded, others stood to speak. The community college president expressing enthusiasm for the training facility. The Historical Society chairwoman emphasizing the cultural importance of the preservation. Small business owners concerned about losing the economic boost the project promised. The unified community support was unexpected and moving. These people cared about the Palmer building, not because it was a Westbrook project, but because it represented something vital to Riverdale's future. "Anyone else wish to speak?" Mayor Wilson asked from the podium. Jackson found himself standing, before he'd fully formed the thought to do so. With Mia watching wide-eyed, he made his way to the front of the room, facing the assembled crowd. "My name is Jackson Reynolds," he began, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Many of you know me from Riverdale Manufacturing, or more recently, from my work consulting on the Palmer Building's vintage machinery restoration." He took a breath, organizing his thoughts. "I'm not a businessman or a politician. I'm a mechanic, a single father, someone who spent his life working with his hands. But the Palmer building project represents something important to me, and I think to all of us, the belief that preserving our past doesn't mean sacrificing our future. As he spoke, the door at the back of the hall opened. Olivia slipped in quietly, surprise evident on her face as she recognized him at the podium. Their eyes met briefly before Jackson continued. The machinery in that building tells Riverdale's story, not just of industrial innovation, but of the hands that built it, maintained it, passed down the knowledge of how it works. Those skills, that knowledge, is disappearing. The Palmer Project isn't about nostalgia. It's about connecting generations, ensuring those skills survive. Jackson gestured to Mia in the audience. My daughter never knew her grandfather was part of building those machines. She never knew her mother dreamed of restoring classic cars. But through projects like Palmer, she can connect to that heritage while looking toward her own future. The room had gone completely silent, all eyes on Jackson as he concluded. If we let this project fail because of corporate politics or financial short-sightedness, we're not just losing a building renovation. We're losing a piece of ourselves, our community, our story, our potential. That's worth fighting for. Applause erupted as he stepped away from the podium, spreading through the room like a wave. As Jackson made his way back to Mia, he caught Olivia's gaze again. She stood at the back, eyes shining with what might have been pride or tears, or both. By the time the meeting concluded, a community action committee had formed, committed to demonstrating public support for the Palmer Project through media outreach, petitions, and direct appeals to the Westbrook Industries Board. Outside, as residents dispersed into the evening air, Olivia approached Jackson and Mia, her expression a complex mix of emotions. That was unexpected, she said quietly, and remarkable. Jackson shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Just speaking the truth, your truth, about what matters. Olivia knelt to Mia's level. Hello, Mia. Thank you for sharing your dad with us tonight. Mia beamed. He made a good speech, didn't he? Are you going to save the building now? Olivia smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. We're certainly going to try. Standing, she turned back to Jackson. The board chairman was impressed by the community turnout. He's called another meeting for tomorrow morning. That's good news, Jackson said, though he sensed there was more she wasn't saying. It is, but Olivia hesitated, choosing her words carefully with Mia present. My father is still pushing his agenda. The board respects him, and he's convinced this project is a mistake, at least in its current form, with its current personnel. The implication was clear. Richard Westbrook was still demanding Jackson's removal from the equation. I see, Jackson said. And what do you think? I think, Olivia replied, her voice strengthening, that it's time I made my own position absolutely clear. She glanced at her watch. I need to prepare for tomorrow, but after the meeting, we should talk. Really talk. Jackson nodded, hope and apprehension mingling in his chest. We will. As Olivia walked away, Mia tugged at Jackson's hand. Daddy, did you decide about Chicago? Jackson looked down at his daughter, then back at Olivia's retreating figure. I think I have, Pumpkin. I think I have. Dawn broke clear and cold over Riverdale as Jackson stood in his garage workshop, running his hand along the Mustang's sleek lines one last time before heading to Riverbend. The car, partially disassembled, but already showing the promise of its eventual restoration, had come to represent so much of his journey. Past grief, present challenge, future possibility. He'd made his decision during the night, weighing options, consequences, and most importantly, what his heart told him mattered most. Now, with Mia at a friend's house for a morning playdate, He had time for one crucial stop before meeting Olivia after her board presentation. Riverbend was quiet when he arrived, most members still at their day jobs. Patricia Holden looked up in surprise as he entered her office. "Jackson, didn't expect to see you today. That was quite a speech at Town Hall last night." He smiled, slightly embarrassed by the community's response to his impromptu words. "Thanks. I need a favor, Patricia. A big one." 30 minutes later, having secured Patricia's enthusiastic support, Jackson drove to the Palmer building. Construction remained halted, the site eerily quiet compared to its usual bustle of activity. He parked beside Olivia's car, noting that several expensive vehicles, board members presumably, were also present. Rather than entering the main building, Jackson waited outside, knowing Olivia would find him when the meeting concluded. His future, their future, hung in the balance of decisions being made inside, but strangely, he felt a calm certainty about his own choice. The board meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When the door finally opened, board members emerged first, their expressions neutral but not hostile. A positive sign, Jackson hoped. Richard Westbrook followed, his face thunderous as he spotted Jackson waiting. The older man paused briefly, eyes narrowing before continuing to his car without acknowledgement. Finally, Olivia appeared, searching the parking lot until she found Jackson. The smile that broke across her face told him everything he needed to know before she even reached him. "They approved it," she said, breathless with excitement. "Full funding restored, timeline extended, all components preserved, the museum, the training facility, everything." Jackson grinned, relief washing through him. "Your presentation must have been incredible." "It was," Olivia admitted without false modesty. "But honestly, it was the community response that tipped the scales. Your speech, the petitions that started circulating overnight, the calls from business owners, the board couldn't ignore that level of public support." "And your father?" Olivia's expression sobered slightly. "Outvoted, and not pleased about it." She took a deep breath. "I said some things to him that can't be unsaid, about autonomy, about who I choose to value in my life. About his manipulation attempts." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Sounds intense. It was necessary." Olivia held his gaze. "I made it clear that his interference in my professional and personal life is unacceptable. That includes the Chicago offer he arranged for you." "Ah, about that." Jackson reached into his jacket, pulling out the folded Chicago contract. "I made my decision." Olivia went very still. And, instead of answering directly, Jackson tore the contract in half, then quarters, letting the pieces scatter in the wind. "Some opportunities aren't worth the sacrifice," he said quietly. Relief flooded Olivia's expression, quickly followed by concern. "But your position at Riverdale Manufacturing is officially eliminated as of 2 weeks from Friday." Jackson: "Confirmed, but I have an alternative in mind if you're interested in hearing it." Curious, Olivia nodded. "The Palmer project needs someone to oversee the machinery restoration. That position still exists, right?" When Olivia confirmed, he continued, "But it also needs someone to lead the educational program once operations begin, someone who understands both the machines and how to communicate that knowledge." "Are you proposing yourself for both roles?" Olivia asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "Actually, no." Jackson grinned. "I'm proposing something bigger, a partnership between Palmer and Riverbend Restoration." He outlined the plan he'd developed with Patricia Holden's help. Riverbend would provide expertise and hands-on training for the Palmer educational programs, while the Palmer facility would offer expanded space and resources for Riverbend's restoration projects. Jackson would serve as the liaison between the two organizations, leveraging his knowledge of both worlds. "It's perfect," Olivia breathed as he finished explaining. The board would approve it instantly. It expands our community impact without increasing costs, and you'd be working in restoration full-time, Jackson completed. Doing what I love, what I'm good at, while helping preserve the skills for the next generation. He smiled. And no one could claim I got the position because of personal connections. This would be a formal arrangement between two organizations with clear professional boundaries. Olivia studied him, admiration evident in her eyes. You've thought of everything. Not quite everything. Jackson stepped closer, his voice softening. There's still the matter of us. Whatever this is between us that's more than professional. Olivia's breath caught. Yes, your father wasn't entirely wrong, Jackson admitted. Our worlds are different. There will be complications, judgments, adjustments on both sides. Is that your way of saying we shouldn't pursue this? Olivia asked, vulnerability breaking through her usual confidence. No, Jackson said firmly. It's my way of saying I want to pursue it with eyes wide open. No illusions, no pretending the challenges don't exist. He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. But also, no letting fear of those challenges stop us from exploring something that could be extraordinary. Olivia squeezed his hand, a soft smile illuminating her face. I think I can work with those terms. Good, Jackson said, because there's someone else whose opinion matters in all this. He checked his watch. And she's expecting us for lunch in 20 minutes. Mia's face lit up when they arrived at the small diner where her friend's mother had brought her after. The play date. She slid out of the booth, racing toward them with uncontained excitement. Daddy, Olivia, are you both having lunch with me? Did you save the building? Can we get milkshakes? Jackson laughed, scooping her up in a hug. Yes, to all three, Pumpkin. As they settled into the booth, Mia between them, Olivia announced the good news about the Palmer project. Mia listened with solemn attention, then asked the question that mattered most to her 8-year-old perspective. Does that mean we get to stay in our house? And Daddy gets to keep fixing the car? Yes, Jackson assured her. We're staying right where we are. Mia beamed, then turned to Olivia with characteristic directness. And are you going to be around more now? Because Daddy smiles more when you're here. Jackson felt heat rise to his face, but Olivia just laughed, her eyes meeting his over Mia's head. I'd like that very much, she said softly, if it's okay with both of you. It's okay with me, Mia declared. And it's definitely okay with Daddy. He told me so last night. Jackson groaned in mock embarrassment, but didn't deny it. As they ordered lunch, complete with chocolate milkshakes, he watched Olivia interact with his daughter, the easy affection. Between them, the way they both lit up in each other's presence. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever adjustments they'd need to make to bridge their different worlds, this moment of simple joy made it all worthwhile. 6 months later, the Palmer building stood transformed, its grand reopening drawing crowds from throughout the region. The vintage machinery gleamed, meticulously restored under Jackson's guidance. The educational programs, developed in partnership with Riverbend Restoration, had already enrolled their first cohort of students, and the community spaces hummed with activity, fulfilling Olivia's vision of a facility that honored the past while building toward the future. As twilight fell over the celebration, Jackson found himself in the workshop area, making final adjustments to the centerpiece exhibit, a fully restored 1940s assembly line, now operational for demonstrations. Olivia joined him, slipping her hand into his as they admired their shared accomplishment. Your grandfather would have loved this, Jackson said quietly. Olivia smiled, leaning against his shoulder. He would have, almost as much as he would have loved you. Bold claim. He appreciated authenticity and craftsmanship. She turned to face him fully, both of which you have in abundance. From across the room, Mia called out, eager to show them something she'd discovered in the historical display. As they walked hand in hand to join her, Jackson reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a broken-down truck in the rain to this moment of shared purpose and deepening connection. Life would still present challenges. Richard Westbrook remained skeptical, though grudgingly respectful of the project's success. The differences in their background still occasionally created friction, but with each passing day, those differences mattered less than what united them. A shared vision, mutual respect, and growing love that neither had expected to find. Behind them, the restored machines stood as testament to what skilled hands could rebuild. Before them stretched a future neither had imagined possible. One they were crafting together with patience and purpose, one careful restoration at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.